Hello everybody, I am Tom and you are watching me play Baldur's Gate 3. Specifically, this is my class guide series. Today, we're going to go over the fighter. There are some subclasses for the fighter, but you don't choose them until you reach level 2, so we'll go over that when we actually reach them. But as far as the actual features you get as a fighter, fighters have mastered the art of combat, wielding weapons with an unmatched skill and wearing armor like a second skin. Maximum hit points per level is 12. And class features: Strength saving throw proficiency, Constitution saving throw proficiency, and then you get proficiency in everything. Light armor, medium armor, heavy armor, shields, simple weapons, and martial weapons. So that is literally every weapon in the game, shields, and all armor in the game. So you can use anything you want. They are very, very versatile when it comes to a class selection. You also get Second Wind, which is essentially a bonus action. You can use it once per long rest, and it gives you a heal. It's a self-heal. You can heal yourself 1d10 plus 1 hit points. Now, as for race choice, a couple of choices you can do here. It's worth noting that you can either focus on dexterity or strength, or both. Any way works relatively well here. And depending on that is going to depend on your class choice, obviously. If you're okay with focusing on dex, then pretty much any race will do you pretty well, to be honest. You can see High Elf here gets +2 into dexterity and +1 into intelligence. If you plan on going down there's one of the subclasses is kind of a magey type, it's like a hybrid between mage and warrior. It's called the Eldritch Knight. Sorry about that cut. Something. There was a wasp in my room. The Eldritch Knight, it's like a hybrid between a warrior and a mage. So if you want that, you're going to want some intelligence, so getting the +1 into intelligence from a high elf is not a bad choice. Next up, Tiefling. My suggestion here, if you go as a Zariel Tiefling, you get a +1 into your strength and a +2 in your charisma. I've said this on my previous build videos as well, but it's generally pretty nice, in my opinion, to have charisma on your main character, because they're likely going to be the ones who's going to be doing the talking. But, strictly speaking, charisma isn't that useful on a fighter. So you may want to pass this up. But if you're going to go for a Tiefling, I would say probably your best choice here is likely going to be the Zariel Tiefling, because you get that bonus into strength. As for Drow, you get the +2 into dexterity, which is nice, so if you're going to go dexterity-based fighter, not a bad choice. Human, good choice for everything, because you get a +1 into literally everything. Githyanki, quite a good choice for a fighter, because you get +2 into strength. And, as I said, Eldritch Knight uses intelligence, so Githyanki is probably a pretty damn good choice for intelligence, but I'll go into that a bit in a second when I go over the stats. Dwarf. Very good. Gold Dwarf, not quite so good as the Shield Dwarf, because the Shield Dwarf gets +2 into Strength and +2 into Constitution, both of which you need a lot of as a fighter. So the Shield Dwarf is actually amazingly good for a fighter, particularly a strength-based fighter. Half Elf, same thing, you can put these into any points you like. If you really like, you can go Strength and Dexterity. Give yourself a big bump into them. You also get +2 into your Charisma, which again, as I've said, is nice. And finally you have Halfling, Dexterity based, isn't horrible. The Strong Heart, for instance, gets +2 into Dexterity, +1 into Constitution, which isn't a bad choice either. For my purposes, I think I'm actually going to go as a Shield Dwarf, because I like the additional strength, I also like the Constitution. But let's actually go over the ability scores and how I would suggest you build them. I'm actually just going to put all of these down to base, so that I can go over them from base. Alright, so, as I have said, you're probably going to want strength or dexterity, but you can build into both. It's notable here that dexterity is, if you're going to go heavy armor, dexterity is far less relevant. Because as I went over with the Cleric video, your dexterity is used to determine your armor class, but only if you're wearing light armor or medium armor. If you're wearing heavy armor, it's not taken into account. However, I would say that a lot of the time, a medium armor fighter is often going to be better than a heavy armor fighter. So dexterity is usually pretty good, because you're likely going to be using a bow in a lot of situations. Particularly as the game is now, as someone actually pointed out in the comment section, the current kind of metagame would be to use ranged weaponry. It is just better at the moment, just because of the current class choices you have. So having dexterity to be able to wield a bow is not a bad idea, so I would say at least 10 dexterity. You probably don't want the negative modifier on your dexterity. Constitution is very important, it determines your health, so you want to bump your Constitution. I would say at least a 14 is usually what I would do. If you're going to go into an Eldritch Knight, you can pick up Intelligence. However, there is a particular item you can get in Early Access that will fix this problem entirely if you want to go Eldritch Knight a bit later. So I'm actually going to leave this as an 8. I'm going to have very, very low Intelligence. Wisdom I'm going to put up to 10, just so I can have relatively good Perception. Perception, well, when I say relatively good, I mean not bad Perception. Charisma, same kind of deal. I'm actually going to go up to 12, just so I have a +1 for my Persuasion, Intimidation, all that kind of stuff. As for the remainder of the points, we're going to bump Strength up to 16. I can actually go to 17, but I don't want to because you don't get a bonus to your modifier there. So I'm going to go 16 in Strength and 15. That's tempting. 16 Constitution and 16 Strength is actually not a bad choice. You do have a lot of freedom with the fighter, which is why I'm not saying this is the loadout you should use, because you can pretty much do whatever you want, depending on how you want to build. I'm thinking this isn't horrible. Let's bump that down. We'll do Constitution down to 14, and then Charisma up to there. Sure. That works for me. It's a relatively even build. We're going to focus mainly on strength here. As I said, dexterity is also nice. This +2 particularly is very, very good to have, because I'm planning on wearing medium armor, and this +2 is all we're going to get for the bonus for dexterity. It actually caps out your dexterity for medium armor. But this is what I'm going to use for this build, but as I said, it's very, very dependent on what you want to do with your fighter. If you want to use your bow all the time, then you're going to want a very high dexterity, and you can even afford to just tank your strength if you really want to. Obviously, that wouldn't be a great choice for the race choice if you did that. But nonetheless, we can go over the level ups. Alright, so going from level 1 to level 2 as a fighter. 1, you get your HP increase, which you do with all levels on all classes. You also get Action Surge. This allows you to give yourself another action. You can only use this once per long rest, but you can just give yourself another action, so you can attack. If the thing is nearly dead, you take an Action Surge, and you attack again, you can get a kill. If you just want to attack things twice, or you want to help a friend up and then also attack, Action Surge has a lot of uses. It's very, very good. You also get a class passive. So you can choose between these 6 class passives. Firstly, of archery, you gain a +2 bonus to attack rolls you made with ranged weapons. So if you want to use bows a lot, good choice here. Defense. You gain +1 bonus to your armor class, your likelihood of being hit, while wearing armor. So any armor, as long as you're wearing either light, medium, or heavy armor, you'll be getting this bonus. It's one of the best in my opinions. It's just fantastic. Next we have dueling. When you're wielding a melee weapon in one hand and the other hand is empty, you gain a +2 bonus to damage rolls with that weapon, increasing your chance to do heavy damage. So this increases your damage when you just have a blank hand and one weapon. It's interesting. I think the idea here is you take this if you don't want to dual wield, because normally dual wielding is straight up better, but with dueling you could make the argument that using a one-handed weapon would be better than dual wielding. Still hard to pass up a shield, in my opinion, but nevertheless. You also have great weapon fighting. If you roll a 1 or a 2 on the damage die for an attack with a two-handed melee weapon, you can re-roll the die and you have to use the new roll, so just on average you're going to be doing more damage. It's quite nice. It's worth noting here it's specifically with a two-handed weapon. You can't do that with a one-handed weapon, it has to be a two-handed weapon. Next we have protection. When you have a shield, impose disadvantage on an ally who attacks one of your allies when they are within 5 feet. You must be able to see the enemy. Essentially, if you are standing next to an ally, you can give them advantage on... you can give the enemy disadvantage on the attack of your ally. Relatively useful. And then we have 2 weapon fighting style. When you attack with 2 weapons, you can add your ability modifiers to the damage of the offhand attack. This here is the problem that I have with dueling. Dueling is nice. It counteracts using a weapon, because ordinarily you can't add your attack modifier, your ability modifier to the damage you do with your second weapon, but you can just take 2 weapon fighting and do more damage. In any case, I'm going to take defense for this level up, but these are the choices you get going to level 2 as a fighter. Relatively easy compared to the cleric. The cleric we did first. Fighter is a lot easier. Anyway, I'll be back in a second. Alright, so we move on now to level 3. There are 2 particular subclasses you can choose from when you go level up to level 3 as a fighter. We have the Battlemaster and the Eldritch Knight. I'll first go over the Battlemaster. I'm then going to go over the Eldritch Knight. First things first, more hit points as always. Excuse me, had to cough. Hopefully I'll remember to cut that out. So with the Battle Master, you get a set of 3 passives that you can choose out of a possible 4. You gain Menacing Attack. You can spend... actually, I'll read through the subclass, how the subclass works, then I'll give you the passives. Battle Masters are paragons of tactical superiority, combining combat maneuvers and experience in a field to dominate every fight. You get 4 superiority die. You have 4 superiority die, which are d8s. Your Battle Master maneuvers are fueled by these die, and die is expended when you use it. You regain all of your expended superiority dice when you finish a short or long rest. So you can essentially, you've got 4 dice that you can use as a currency. Menacing Attack. Spend a superiority die to deal 1d6 plus 2 plus 1d8 piercing damage and possibly frighten the target. You can do this with either your bow or you can do this with a melee weapon. You can do either. Same with Pushing Attack. You spend a superiority die to deal the additional damage and possibly push the target up to 15 feet back. So it's like the push action built into an attack. So you get to keep your bonus action if you do this. Rally, you can expend your superiority die to bolster the resolve of nearby allies. It gains an additional 8 hit points. The way this works, by the way, is it doesn't heal you 8 hit points. It gives you 8 temporary hit points on top of whatever you have. Which means that if you're at full health, you can still rally someone to give them more health. And finally, we have Riposte. When a creature misses you with a melee attack, expend a superiority die to retaliate and deal 1d6 plus 3 plus 1d8 slashing damage. So that's a melee-focused thing. Menacing Attack and Pushing Attack here, they say piercing damage. That's because it's going off my bow. I'm wielding both a bow and an axe. If I do it in melee, it will be slashing damage. It will also be 1d6 plus 3 plus 1d8, but nevertheless. That's pretty much the Battle Master. Relatively easy to understand. Next choice is the Eldritch Knight. So the Eldritch Knights study magic to supplement their weaponry, allowing them to overcome resistances from the toughest enemies. So you get spell slots. You get 2 cantrips from the list here. You can have Acid Splash, so you hurl, it's a ranged acid attack effectively. Hurl a bubble of acid that deals 1d6 acid damage to each creature it hits. It also gives the acid condition, which lowers their AC, which is quite useful. We have Blade Ward, gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage for weapon attacks. So essentially you you take half damage from all weapon attacks. Chill Touch, this is a ranged necromancy spell, does 1d8 necrotic damage. Dancing Lights, you create lights. Firebolt, hurl a mote of fire that deals 1d6 fire damage and creates a flammable surface. Friends, enchant a non-hostile creature to gain advantage on charisma checks against it. Light, infuse an object with an aura of light. The difference here between Dancing Lights and Light is light you light up things like objects around you. Dancing Lights you just create an area of dancing lights. Mage Hand, you create a spectral hand that can manipulate and interact with objects. Minor Illusion, create an illusionary image that distracts nearby creatures, compelling them to investigate. Mainly used out of combat most of the time. You can use it in combat, but if they see you cast it, they're not likely to get fooled by it. Poison Spray, project a puff of noxious gas that deals 1d10 poison damage. Ray of Frost, very similar to Firebolt, only it does ice damage and can make them fall over. Shocking Grasp, you do a melee spell attack, so you grab them and do lightning damage. And then we have True Strike. Divine a character's defenses to give you advantage on attack rolls against it. My suggestions here would be to go for things like Shocking Grasp and Poison Spray. The reason being that these are the kind of spells that you're going to be doing up close. And they're quite good for up close. You're likely going to want to get there anyway if you're using melee weapons. If you're more of a ranged fighter, then obviously go for things like Firebolt, Chill Touch, Ray of Frost. All good choices here. But my suggestion would be Shocking Grasp and Poison Spray. Alternatively, you can make the argument that you want to give yourself a ranged option. So maybe you want to go Chill Touch for Necromancy and then Shocking Grasp when you're close. Also a fairly good option. You also get 2 first level spells. That's interesting. Oh, I see. I know why this is doing this. Okay, so you can get 2 first level spells that are from the Evocation or Abjuration School of Magic. So that's what these ones are. So you can see we have Burning Hands, Magic Missile, Mage Armor, Protection from Good and Evil, Thunderwave, and Witch Bolt. I would say Burning Hands is a good choice. Magic Missile is fantastically good because it can't miss. So Burning Hands, you do a blast of fire right in front of you. Magic Missile, you fire off darts that will hit an enemy. 100% chance to hit, so very nice. Mage Armor, only very good if you're not wearing armor, which obviously if you're a fighter, you should probably be wearing armor. Granted, you can cast this on other people, so I guess if you want your fighter to be a bit, how would you say, supporty, I suppose, you can give him support magic. Protection from good and evil, protect a creature from aberrations, celestials, elementals, fae, fiends, and undead. So you get advantage when they try and charm, frighten, or possess you. Thunder Wave is like a big explosion of thunder out in front of you. Thunder is effectively sound damage, as opposed to lightning, as you can see here, with Witch Bolt, which is a lightning attack. The good thing about Witch Bolt is if you hit, you stay connected, and you can just activate it the next turn and do damage guaranteed. I think I will drop Flaming Hands, actually, and pick up Thunder Wave instead. Fairly good spell. And you can pick a third spell that can be from any school of magic. So you see here, we've got a bunch of different spells that we can choose from. All pretty good. False Life is actually not a bad one to give yourself, in all honesty. Temporary hit points are always good. Alternatively, you can find a familiar if you want a familiar. Sleep is very, very powerful. Putting enemies to sleep is always amazing. But really, it's up to you here. I would say False Life is a pretty good one. Giving yourself extra hit points is always nice. But as you can see here, you just give yourself spells. It is worth noting, though, that your spells are based off your intelligence score. So if you plan on building an Eldritch Knight, make sure you give yourself some intelligence, or you can do what I'm going to do in this video, which I'll show you a bit later, when we get to the equipment section. Alright, so for the feat choice when you level up at level 4. Obviously, ability score improvement, I'm going to say this with every class, it's always a good choice. Maybe not necessarily the best choice, but depending on your build, it very much could be. I will note here that if you're not planning on using the headband that gives you additional intelligence, which we'll talk about very shortly, and you want to be an Eldritch Knight, you're going to need to probably take ability score improvement just to give your intelligence a bump, I would say. But going on to the, in a second, I'm going to talk about the headband you can get, which will vastly fix your intelligence problems. You won't really need to worry about it. But moving forward, I also suggest Shieldmaster if you're wielding a shield. It's a very, very good ability. I actually have it here twice. That's how good I think it is. I've just noticed that I put it here twice. Oh well, I can leave it here, it doesn't matter. You gain a +2 bonus to your dexterity saving throw when wielding a shield. If a spell forces you to make a dexterity saving throw, you can use your reaction to shield yourself. On a successful save, you take no damage. Yeah, so that's how important I think it is. I put it here twice. In early access, I actually find this not particularly useful, but my assumption is going forward when the full game releases, it's going to be fantastically powerful. That's always how I've seen Shieldmaster, is early gameplay, not so good. When you get into mid to high gameplay, very, very, very good feat. If you plan on using a big two-handed weapon, I would say Great Weapon Master is definitely the one you want to go for. When a melee attack scores a critical hit or kills a creature, you can make another melee attack as a bonus action. When attacking with heavy weapons you are proficient with, attack rolls take a -5 penalty, but their damage increases by 10. That's very, very good. Arguably, even worth taking if you don't use big heavy weapons, because the critical hit bonus works no matter what type of melee weapon you're using. If you hit a crit, you can take another attack. That's fantastic. But it does, that second part is, you know, if you're using a heavy weapon, you get more benefit from this feat. Tough, always very good. Fighters are often ends up being the tanks of your team, so having extra hit points is fantastic. Dual wielder, if you want to dual wield, so if you want to give up a shield or a two-handed weapon, then dual wielder is probably something you want. Effectively, this means that you can use any weapons in each hand. So you could use a longsword in each hand, for instance, which makes you much more powerful. You get a +1 bonus to armor class while wielding a melee weapon in each hand. You can use two-weapon fighting even if your weapons aren't light. That last part is really specifically quite nice. It means that you can use two, as long as they're one-handed weapons, you can use two of them in each hand and it just works perfectly fine. So that's really good. You can just use two longswords. Fantastic. Two Morning Stars. It's a D8 on both hands. Alright, moving on, we have Defensive Duelist. When you're attacked with a melee attack, you can use your reaction to increase your armor class, potentially causing the attack to miss. Once again, tanking, usually pretty good for a fighter, so I think Tough and Defensive Duelist both go with that pretty well, makes them pretty damn good. Same with Shieldmaster. Moving on here, we have Skilled. always a good feat just because you're likely going to be the face of the party, so it's probably nice to have a few proficiencies and skills that you use in dialogues like persuasion and things like that. So skilled is good to pick that up if you don't have them already. And finally, martial adept. Learn 2 maneuvers from the Battlemaster archetype and receive 1 additional superiority die to fuel them. You regain expanded superiority dice after a short rest. Short or long rest. I would say this is particularly worth it if you are an Eldritch Knight. Just because the Battlemaster maneuvers are so good. It's worth noting that if you are a Battlemaster, this is kind of worth it as well, just because you can pick up that 4th Battlemaster skill, and you get an additional superiority die, so you can do your superiority moves more often. But it's certainly less valuable than it is on the Eldritch Knight. One other side note I guess I'll add here is that it's potentially worth picking up if you want to do some magic, but you want to be a Battlemaster, so you want to be a Battlemaster, you also want to do some magic. You can take the Magic Adept feats for whatever class you want, and that will actually give you some access to magic without actually having to take the Eldritch Knight. So that's another option for you as well. But with that, we can move on to the equipment. Alright everybody, so now we can go on to some equipment that is good for fighters. And also, I'm going to have some kind of cuts in here of how to get some of these things, because they're not quite as easy as just buying them as with previous characters, previous classes that I've done. Let's start with these, the Gloves of Power. These are very easy to get. These are the gloves that you get off one of the goblins that you fight out the front of the Druid Grove. So the fight you do just here, that's like the big cutscene, Zevlor, the guy's trying to get in the gate, Zevlor says, open the gate, but it's too late, and the goblins attack. Kill the goblins. One of the guys here has these gloves, it's 100% drop rate, so you don't have to worry about it. But it is worth noting that before you wear these gloves, you need to come to the Goblin Camp and get Priestess Gut to give you the brand of the Absolute. If you have the brand of the Absolute, these have no penalty. Which it does say in the actual description of these if you read them. But what this does is Absolute's Bane. Creatures hit by an attack may receive a d4 penalty to attack rolls and saving throws, which is Bane. Effectively, when you hit an enemy, they get the Bane effect on them, so they get a penalty to their attack rolls and their saving throws of a d4. However, if you do not have the Absolute's Mark, which is an invisible brand that Priestess Gut will actually put on you, invisible to everyone who except for the faithful of the Absolute. So there's no real downside to having it. But if you have that brand, there's no downside. However, if you don't have that brand, you can read the actual description here. Blessed by Priestess Gut, these gauntlets aid any who bear the Absolute's Mark upon their flesh, but woe any non-believer who hopes to steal their power. What this means is if you're not branded as by the Absolute's Mark, then you also get baned when you do make an attack. So not only do you put the bane on the enemy, you also put bane on yourself. So make sure you go get the mark before you wear these, but they are quite good, so I would suggest it. As for armor, as I did with my cleric, the Githyanki half-plate is pretty damn good, so I grabbed that. As was pointed out in the comments of my previous video, you can get other sets of Githyanki half-plate. The reason I didn't point this out is because it's the kind of the further on in Lysel's story quest, you meet up with some Githyankis, and depending on how the conversation goes there, you can end up in a fight. And if you kill them, then you get, I think, 2 more sets of Githyanki half-plate, which is great and all. The reason I didn't include it is by the time you get there, I would say that fight with the Githyankis is probably the hardest fight in the entire game, at least as far as early access is concerned. So getting that armor after that point, sure, that's great, but by that point you've already done anything that's difficult in the game anyway. That's why I didn't point that out. But I have said, as I said earlier, you can get some +1 scale mail, which is just as good as this. Just go to the blacksmith in the Druid Grove. As for rings, we have Crusher's Ring. Increase the wearer's movement speed. This is particularly useful, good for any warrior because they need to traverse the battlefield very quickly, but particularly good if you choose to play as a dwarf, because their movement speed at base is only 25 feet rather than 30, so this will put you up to 35 feet, which will make you much speedier. As far as getting Crusher's Ring, I'll insert a clip right here of a guaranteed way to get it. Essentially, you can do certain checks, ability checks, and you can get the ring by sliding it off his finger by kissing his feet. There's a couple of ways to get it through ability checks. I've just shown you the way how to get it without doing any ability checks. If you fail all your ability checks, you can get into the position where you fight Crusher. Doing so, he will go take a piss, and when he goes and takes a piss, you kill him and take the ring. I'll put that up right now.
Don't push it, worm. I can still bash your face in. Yeah, I think I will. Wait! I yield! I yield!
Take his head. He won't be putting it to good use.
Yes! Yes! There! There! I've done it.
Nicely done. I probably couldn't have resisted kicking him in the teeth.
Arrogant pig.
Statue of Saint.
Alright, and we're back. So, as far as weapons goes, there's a few that I suggest. If you are doing a sword and shield type build, or an axe and shield in this case, the Dragon's Grasp is a very, very good melee weapon. It's a hand axe, so it only does 1d6 slashing. However, this sets burning when you hit things, and burning does 4 to 5 fire damage per turn for a couple of turns. So this actually increases your DPS quite significantly. So I really, really enjoy this as a single-handed melee weapon. Alternatively, there is a two-handed melee weapon. Where you get this, by the way, is you can buy it off Aaron, who is a druid at the Druid's Grove, who is standing right here. This pot right here is where Aaron's standing. He's like the first trader you run into in the Druid Grove. I'm sure lots of you have spoken to him before, but he will sell you that hand axe. Alternatively, if we go to Lysel, you can see that I have the Watcher's Guide. This is also quite a good weapon. It is a two-handed spear, so it doesn't do a huge amount of damage, only a 1d8 for a two-handed weapon. However, the ability you get with it, Rush, is really good because it gives you extra mobility, because you can do your full movement and then use Rush to shoot off another, like 15 feet, I think it shoots you, and you attack everything in that line, so you can attack big lines of enemies, which is really good. It also gives you Death's Promise. Whenever you miss, the next attack you make has advantage. That's just fantastic. It's an amazing ability and perfect on any weapon. Finally, I want to talk about the Warped Headband of Intellect. I'll put up a clip right now of how you get this headband. It's relatively difficult to do early game, but it can be done, particularly after you reach level 3. You hit level 3, you're probably pretty good. But this comes off a particular ogre. You notice there may be an ogre who is relatively intelligent. This is the reason why. But, specifically if you are playing a Eldritch Knight, this item is particularly amazing because you can make your intelligence 8. If I take this off, my dwarf has an intelligence of 8. He's a dum-dum. We put this on, he now has an intelligence of 18, which gives me a +4 modifier on all of my spells. So that's quite good. I'll cut in now how to get it.
Food? Food? Food?
Alright, we're back. So I wouldn't have shown that entire fight, I would have just shown the culmination of the fight. But you can beat up those ogres, and then you are rewarded with this headband of intellect. It was in his stomach, as you can see here. This particular circuit is covered in yellow slime and has pieces of half-digested mutton behind the gems. However, it still increases your intellect by up to 18, no matter what it is. So, we essentially get 10 free ability points, which is insane. Absolutely insane, but it makes for an incredibly powerful build. Our actual stat total here is insanely high. But yeah, I think that's about it. Again, this is only really necessary if you are playing a Eldritch Knight, because they're the only ones that need intelligence. But also, if you don't want to use this headband, you need to put some points into intelligence if you want to be an Eldritch Knight. You can see I've got 8. You would have to take out some wisdom and charisma, probably 4 points, 2 points out of each of these. Constitution down 1 to 14, and get your intelligence up to like 12 or 14? 12, I think you would have to get it to begin with, and then probably on your ability score improvement, put points into intelligence. You probably can't afford to take a feat, because Eldritch Knights generally take a lot of spread in their stat allocation, but with this headband, you don't need to take the spread. You can do it. You can dump your intelligence and then just use this headband to counteract that. But I think that's it about the fighter. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments below. About any of the gear, if I didn't explain how to get anything adequately, or if you have any suggestions, leave them down in the comments as well. But I think that's going to be it. So if you like this video, please leave a like. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.